coming up on just 43 minutes to launch. Great nighttime views of our Falcon 9 and Crew-7 capsule there on the screen.
Dragon.
Go ahead, Dragon.
We can hear the polls for top load and launch readiness, so just give me a call.
And sorry, Dragon, I just misspoke. Last of you said it's there. Can you please repeat?
Yeah, from Dragon, we
polling
just
is
hear
complete.
the polls for
The joint NASA and SpaceX teams have pulled go for LES arm, propellant load, and launch.
Okay, we just received the go-ahead to proceed with the fueling and what's called the LES arming. The LES is the Launch Escape System. If you're familiar with our rockets in the old days, at the very top of the rocket, you see a red tower. For the Apollo, it was a white tower with escape rockets that would pull the capsule away in the event where a rocket was going off course or an imminent explosion. We do not have a rocket like that on SpaceX. The rockets are contained on the capsule itself. There are 8 what's called Super Draco thrusters. They will push the vehicle away from the rocket. They have about 130,000 pounds of thrust. They fire for about 10 seconds to get the capsule about 1 mile away from the rocket. That system is being armed right now. So that is what's going on right now. Now we're at this point of the launch, or out of the countdown. Now the countdown is actually underway. The propellant loading will begin in about 5 minutes. That propellant loading is for the RP-1. That's Rocket Propellant 1, a very highly refined kerosene. That will begin on the first stage and the second stage. We'll also be loading the very, very super cold liquid oxygen, about 340 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. That'll occur at the 35-minute mark, both of those different events. At 16 minutes, we begin loading that super cold liquid oxygen into the second stage. Next major event after that is what we call the engine chill down. Now the temperature of the exhaust is thousands of degrees. What we do is we flow that liquid oxygen, very cold propellant, into the surrounding area around of the engine bell. Make sure that engine is getting cooled down so it won't have a big thermal shock when you ignite. The next major event is when we go to internal power. The vehicle on the way up has to operate on batteries. Up to that point, we use Florida Power and Light to power the vehicle. So that occurs at the 5-minute mark. The flight computers go through the final countdown sequence at a minute, and the tanks are fully pressurized at that time. At 45 seconds, the launch director will give the final go-ahead for launch. The ignition sequence begins at 3 seconds before launch, and we lift off at 0. Now, we can abort the count at any time. Okay. Now, the plus count events after we go up. When we launch, 1 minute and 2 seconds into the flight, we go through what we call max Q. That's probably the most difficult part of the mission. When you're on the ground and you're not moving, you have a lot of air pressure on you, but the vehicle's not moving. As you go higher and higher, you're going faster and faster. There's less and less air, but you're hitting that air a lot faster, so there's more pressure on the vehicle. There's a magical point where the amount of speed you have and the amount of pressure on the outside is the most. A second later, it's a little bit less. A second after that, a little bit less. But the maximum pressure will occur at 1 minute and 2 seconds after the flight. 2 minutes, 26 seconds, we'll have what's called MECO, main engine cutoff. That is when the first stage engine cuts off. A few seconds later, we'll have the first and second stages separate, and you'll see that on the view screen over there. The second stage will ignite, and very shortly thereafter, just a few minutes, we'll have what we call the entry burn. The rocket will turn around, the first stage will turn around, start heading back towards us. The landing burn will occur about 7 minutes, 27 seconds into the flight. You'll see an orange flame as it's coming back. Again, that'll be just a little bit to the left of the vehicle assembly building. And at that point, the landing will be at 7 minutes, 44 seconds after liftoff. The second stage will continue to fire for about 6 minutes, 3 seconds. The Dragon capsule will separate from the rocket. The capsule with the crew will separate from the rocket about 12 minutes, 49 seconds into the flight. Again, they'll rendezvous and connect to the International Space Station tomorrow morning at about 8:50 to about 10 minutes to 9 tomorrow is when we'll arrive at the International Space Station. Again, a crew of 4 aboard today. You got to see them a few minutes ago if you're watching that view screen. 1 American, 1 Russian, 1 from the European Space Agency representing Denmark, 1 from the Japanese Space Agency representing Japan. The astronaut from Japan and the astronaut from Denmark have both spent time on the International Space Station. The 2 rookies are the American and the Russian.
Even the flow of the fuel itself as it comes on board.
The scenarios in which the launch escape system would be used.
F9 tanks venting for prop load in 10 seconds. Expect loud venting.
There they are warning them about exactly what you just mentioned, giving them a heads up. That
Now, one of the things you're going to see, and in a short time, you'll see some smoke coming from from about halfway up the vehicle. You'd be able to see it. You might be able to see it on our screen here. You'll definitely be able to see it on the view screen. Nothing to be alarmed about. That is the super cold liquid oxygen venting from the inside, and that'll continue for quite some time. So again, as soon as I see that, I'll be sure to let you know about that. During the daytime, it's clearly visible. At night, I think you probably have to look at the view screen, but you'll start seeing some smoke coming off the middle part of the vehicle.
sort of inside the Dragon, inside their spacecraft, as it's being loaded with propellants.
That's correct.
Now, some of you might be wondering, how come you can't see the rocket itself? Well, from our viewpoint, the black tower is directly in front of the rocket. So it's the black tower, the other side of the tower is where the rocket is. So the viewpoints that you'll see on the screen, they have a camera positioned in a different place. So you won't see the rocket till it clears the pad, and that'll just take a few seconds. But after that, you'll be able to see it the rest of the way up. Looks like a very, very pretty night tonight. You'll be able to see it for quite some time.
Velocity 436 miles per hour, so it really moves. It can also get it off the top of a moving rocket as well, so
Right.
it's got to have that kind of power.
Right, at all those different phases, all the way until they're in orbit. And that's one of the things that we protect for here as well when we look at the weather forecast. It's not just for the actual launch itself, but to protect for any of those contingency landing scenarios in the various areas where they would splash down in that event.
Again, the clock right there says 34:56. It's actually closer to about 34 minutes right now. Again, that is about a 1 minute delay. So again, when you watch when we get down to about the final minute, don't pay attention to that screen. Start looking at the pad, because that's where the action is going to be.
Oxygen. The oxidizer. That part we can see externally because as the liquid oxygen levels rise inside the Falcon 9, it's of course super chilled liquid oxygen, highly densified, and it will super chill the skin as well of the rocket and will condense the air around it. And there's been well over 200 Falcon 9 launches, so if you've seen one before, you're familiar with the sight. The rocket condensing that air, that warm, humid Florida air.
Okay, as we're standing by right now, again, the fueling now is underway for the first and second stages, RP1 for the first and second stages, liquid oxygen on the first stage. Give me a few minutes, I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about what you're going to be seeing here tonight as far as the rocket itself. The Falcon 9 rocket is 215 feet tall and about a 12-foot diameter. The weight, about 1,210,000 pounds. The thrust you're going to see is 1.7 million pounds of thrust. And again, Right now they're on the screen, you're seeing our crew. That's the commander of our mission tonight. She's the American who'll be the commander.
I grew up, I always loved team sports from a really young age because you rely on one another, and that's something that I think is really important to know going forward in your career. I joined the Marine Corps sure I wanted to fly jets. I thought you had to be a jet pilot to become an astronaut. I actually went to watch STS-116 launch while I was waiting to start flight school, and Sunny Williams happened to be on that flight. I realized she was a Navy helicopter pilot, and from that point on, I went full steam ahead. All four of us are so proud to represent what is possible when we come together. Ultimately, everything we do is to benefit the Earth.
Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the spacecraft. Now, again, you might have heard some terms you're not familiar with. Falcon 9 is what the rocket is. Okay, that's what's taking them into space. They're inside a capsule. That capsule is called the Crew-7. There are several of these. The one they're on board tonight is the Crew-7 called Endurance. And again, today is its third flight into space. It sent the third crew to the International Space Station. It sent the fifth crew to the International Space Station. And today is the seventh crew going up under what's called the Commercial Crew Program. So, the vehicle again is Endurance. On the space station right now is another vehicle, and that vehicle is Endeavour. So that is already connected to the International Space Station. That took a previous crew up. Now the capsule they're in is about 12 feet tall, about 9 feet 8 inches in diameter. Its weight is about 27,000 pounds. It has a second part to it, a service area underneath it. The combined height of both of these craft about 27 feet. But the habitable part, the part where the crew itself is in, is about 12 feet. The weight, again, about 27,600 pounds. And again, they'll be in that craft until 8:50 tomorrow morning when they should connect to the International Space Station. As far as the SpaceX company itself, people want to know how many vehicles they've flown. Tonight, should we launch, this will be the 250th Falcon 9 mission, the 193rd of this kind, called the Falcon 9 Block 5, the advanced Falcon 9 rocket. The booster we have tonight is booster number 1081.1. What does the .1 mean? Well, the .1, remember, the Elon Musk reflies his booster. So if this booster was making another flight, it would be 1081.2. So we know how many times these boosters are flown. We've had Elon Musk has flown more than 10 flights, I think some up to 15 flights already. The idea for the Falcon 9 is to fly 10 flights, do a major overhaul, fly another 10, do a major overhaul, and do that cycle 10 times. Hopes to get 100 flights out of each of the rockets. Now, the Pad 39, which is where we are, 39A, if all goes well tonight, it'll be the 58th time SpaceX has launched from there. Again, for those of you who were here earlier this evening, that is our most historic pad. Every astronaut that ever flew and landed on the moon, that's where they launched from. Many space shuttles launched there as well. And to your left, you might notice another pad. You can see some of the orange lights right up there. That's Pad 39B. We launched space shuttles from there as well. We launched our first international space flight from there, but its big day is coming up a year from November, so about 15 months from now. We will be launching a crew of 4, 3 Americans, 1 Canadian, aboard what we call Project Artemis on a Space Launch System rocket, and they will circle the moon on a flight that will take about 10 days. It'll be the first time that we've been back to the moon since 1972. So again, they'll take off from Pad 39B. That's the launch pad you see. To the left, there's one flashing light and a big orange tower with orange lights on it right there. So, as we're getting closer to launch right now, 190 of these Falcon 9 boosters have been reused also. And this will be the 59th SpaceX launch this year. That includes the missions they've done from here at the Kennedy Space Center and from Vandenberg Air Force Base. That's the crew emblem, the one you see there on the screen. Each crew designs their own emblem.
White and red on the tail are the common colors and the flags of all 4 nations flying on this mission.
Now we are less than 30 minutes to launch, so let's check back in with Daryl and Jessica at KSC, where the countdown continues.
All right, thank you very much. Everything going well with the countdown so far. A little over a mile and a half from the launch pad we're going from today, this morning, 39A, is 39B, where the mobile launcher is back out on the pad right now, going through testing for the Artemis II crewed mission to the moon late next year. Here's more about Artemis in our Moon Minute. For the first time, Artemis II astronauts got an up-close look at the Orion spacecraft that will fly them around the moon. Astronauts Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen visited Orion at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
And it looks amazing. Their handiwork is gorgeous. I'm ready to take it for a spin.
Until launch day arrives, the crew is training at the Johnson Space Center in Texas. They use the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, a giant pool, to practice safely getting out of a floating mock-up of Orion. And it's not an easy task. Navy divers in rafts will harness and hoist the astronauts into the air by helicopter, where they will be taken to a nearby Navy vessel. Back at Kennedy, we got a look at the brand new Artemis crew transportation vehicles.
So the first 9 miles of the journey to the moon starts in these crew transport vehicles.
On launch day, these fully electric, zero-emission vehicles by Canoe Technologies will reunite the Artemis II astronauts with Orion at Launch Complex 39B. NASA's powerful moon rocket, the Space Launch System, and Orion will carry them on the rest of the 250,000-mile journey to the moon. And that's your Artemis Moon Minute. And for Artemis updates, there's a QR code on the bottom left of your screen, right there. Actually, bottom right. You can visit, you can use your cell phone to scan it, or you can visit the website at nasa.gov/Artemis2. Earlier this evening, our own NASA's Jasmine Hopkins caught up with NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, who was here watching the launch from SpaceX's firing room.
Administrator Nelson, today marks a first for NASA, the first time in a single launch that each astronaut represents a different space agency. So we have NASA, ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. What do you make of this diverse crew?
Well, it's a sign of our times. We are an international program. For example, we're going back to the moon in order to go to Mars. It's going to be an international mission that will launch with an international crew. So too, tonight's launch is entirely an international crew, save for the commander, Jasmine, an American astronaut. And so here we go. Now, isn't it interesting that what space does in our NASA program, it unifies us. It brings people together. And this is so true with what we're seeing tonight.
Right, and Administrator, you recently visited South America, and later on this year you're planning to visit India as well. Why is it so important for NASA to foster these international partnerships?
They are delighted, indeed, eager to learn more about NASA and to partner with NASA. And so that's what we find when we go to another country. It's usually the president that wants to see us. And for example, in this South American trip, we talked to the president of Brazil and Colombia about what NASA can provide in the way of information from our satellites to help them protect the Amazon rainforest from being destroyed, which is a high agenda item for those countries. Indeed, it's a high agenda item for the entire world. I'm going to India. India is one that we want to have a close relationship with. We've already been doing things such as science experiments with India. We've got a major science program going that will be Earth observing with India next January. But now we're going to train and fly an Indian astronaut. So it is happening as we speak, and the United States has been the beneficiary of it.
Absolutely. Administrator Nelson, thank you so much. Back to you.
Just have everybody stand up and,
As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew-7 to the International Space Station today. Starting from the very top of the vehicle is the Dragon spacecraft. In total, there are 16 Draco thrusters Dragon can use in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
And just wanted to note, one thing that we did miss just a moment ago was a call to the crew. There was a sensor issue that they are tracking. However, they are just continuing with the count, continuing to monitor it. And so we are continuing to discuss what we have in front of us, which is Dragon. Together, the Dragon spacecraft and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus 1 under the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect with the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight. The trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo, and on some cargo resupply missions, we use Dragon's trunk to deliver the new solar arrays that are being installed on the space station.
As always, Dragon will be delivered to orbit today by SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, which provides 1.7 million pounds of thrust on its first stage, thanks to its 9 Merlin M1D engines. Once the first and second stages separate, these engines are also used to help land the first stage. The first stage will perform 3 burns today as it makes its way back down to Earth. First is the boost back burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite to help flip the first stage around to head back to the launch site. The second burn is the entry burn. That's where a single engine will reignite and shut down to help slow Falcon 9 down as it prepares to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And then finally, the landing burn. That'll be where 3 engines will slow down the rocket enough to perform a precision landing back down on landing zone 1.
Meanwhile, the second stage continues to orbit, powered by 1 single Merlin vacuum engine with over 220,000 pounds of thrust. The second stage will secure Dragon's entry into low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station on its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing its guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
With T0 coming up in just about 20 minutes, our teams at the Cape and Hangar X are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready. Let's check in with Ronnie for a quick status update. How's it going, Ronnie?
Thanks, Jesse. We are still looking good for an on-time launch just over 20 minutes from now, and we'll keep monitoring all the vehicle systems. There we heard the call out for RP1 load complete on stage 2, so that means we are of course getting closer to liftoff. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy, and we're not tracking any major issues at this time. Right now, we're continuing to prep the vehicle for flight, and propellant loading began at T-minus 35 minutes. We also heard the call out a few minutes ago that the launch escape system is now armed. The range, which is monitoring keep-out zones and other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support launch tonight. Weather also looks good, and we are still tracking just a 5% chance of violation at our T0 time. But as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window, driven by the orbital mechanics constraints of 2 spacecraft meeting in orbit. Fun fact, the technical term for that meeting is called a rendezvous. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we will have to stand down tonight because of that instantaneous launch window, and instead target our backup opportunity, which is tomorrow at 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. But for now, with all systems go, let's turn it back over to Courtney for a status update from Houston.
Thanks, Ronnie. The flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston are ensuring that the space station is ready to receive Dragon. They're also checking all communication links between the station, Dragon, and the ground are working properly, and right now everything is proceeding as planned. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the station will monitor the autonomous docking of Dragon tomorrow when they enter joint operations, which happens when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, which is an invisible boundary that helps us monitor spacecraft arriving and departing. After docking, the crews will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the hatches both on the Dragon side and inside the station's pressurized mating adapter. We expect hatch opening to happen about an hour and a half after docking. Once on board, the astronauts will be greeted by the space station crew and will then join in for opening remarks for the new crew members. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Chris Dobbins is on console overseeing the team for launch, and Flight Director Judd Freeling will be on console tomorrow for docking. That's it from here in Mission Control Houston. I'll toss it back to the team in Florida. Daryl, how's it looking?
All right, thank you very much, Courtney. And if you just joined us, T-minus 17 minutes and counting. The 7th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Commander Jasmine Mobelli, pilot Andreas Mogensen, Andy Mogensen, and mission specialist Satoshi Furukawa and Kasim Borisov are strapped into their seats inside the Dragon Endurance. They're at the top of the rocket. Falcon 9 rocket fueling. That operation is well underway. Launch escape system is armed. Of course, that means Dragon is prepared to launch itself.
Stand by for an update on the sensor. Teams are still discussing and looking for our path forward.
As you just heard there, SpaceX is looking at a sensor issue. And so trying to determine if the sensor is giving good data, good reading, or if...
Start at stage 2, last load.
Okay, you just heard that we're starting to load the liquid oxygen into the second stage. I'm going to be getting off the net to see if we have any more progress on the sensor issue.
On that, in the meantime, propellant load continues.
I think sometimes you have hits on sensors for other reasons. We want to make sure that we are getting an accurate reading of what's happening with the system they're looking at. Probably trying to decide if it's a real signal or if it's a hit from some other reason.
There's a lot of redundancy in the systems, as you mentioned. Those sensors have to be, make sure that the engineers understand.
Okay, I need all of your attention right now. We'll be repeating a safety message. This is at the T-minus 15-minute mark. Please be advised that hazards are inherent in launching and launch viewing. By accepting the invitation to view the launch, you do so with the understanding of the potential risk. Although NASA applies stringent range safety principles and techniques to protect the general public, the workforce, and property for all areas of the Kennedy Space Center during the launch, in the event of an inadvertent circumstance, hazards including debris, blast, and toxics occur. It's imperative that you stay within the controlled area, stay with your group, and strictly follow all instructions provided by NASA. Again, I'll repeat that announcement in about 5 minutes.
Keep going, just keep going.
We've got more than 10,000 people gathered, including these folks. Some special students.
That was the students you see on the screen here. That video was just taken a couple seconds ago. That's the folks here on the NASA side.
Watching their, from the Banana Creek viewing location. They're from the University of Washington, University of Colorado, and Queen's University. They're visiting as part of NASA's First Nations launch, an Artemis Student Challenge, where they design, build, and launch their own high-powered rockets. And those students that you saw there in the stands, they were the grand prize winners. So welcome and enjoy the launch. T-minus 14 minutes and counting. Awaiting Crew-7 are 7 crew members at their destination at the International Space Station. I caught up with 3 of them as they were zipping around the Earth.
Hey, Daryl, good morning.
Well, good morning to you, Frank, Stephen, and Woody. Okay, minutes away from liftoff. You're inside the spacecraft. What's it like?
The rocket is a living, breathing machine. We fuel the Falcon 9 rocket on the pad while the crew is on board. I expected that my heart would be racing, but actually it was just so much like training that I felt quite calm.
Well, I'm sure calm will give way to excitement, right, when Crew-7 comes aboard. What do you think that'll be like?
More than anything, it's your friends coming up to station, right? And so you get to hug and greet your friends that you haven't seen for several months. And it's always just a really fun reunion.
You know, they're coming on board, they're going to live on board. It's really exciting to greet them as new friends and crewmates.
Well, those new friends and crewmates, will you have any advice for them when they come on board, like things to do, things not to do?
The awesome thing is that we have an amazing ground team that catches all of it and keeps us honest and keeps us out of trouble. And so you can just kind of relax and enjoy it and just allow yourself to take it in, because it really is a pretty special experience.
Really enjoy your time up here with the people, with the environment, and with the opportunity to work up here and look at the Earth. It's really amazing. Just really enjoy it.
All right, speaking of enjoyment, do you have a fun way to confirm that you're in space, something you can do? You want to give that move a score, Jessica?
I don't know, it required assistance from 2 crew members, so I don't know, I'll give it an 8.5.
Okay, again, I'm going to remind you about our safety restrictions here. The area between the seating area and the fence line has to be cleared of people. Again, you will not be able to watch the launch between this area. You also cannot watch the launch between the bleacher sections, okay? The idea is in the event of an inadvertent circumstance, that's an emergency evacuation area. So again, the area between the sitting area and the fence line must be cleared except in the handicap zone. So again, you'll no wandering, no people in this area, again, for an emergency evacuation contingency. Now, I'm just going to let you know what we're going to do. As soon as we see the liftoff, on the screen, it'll still say it's at least a half a minute away. They're going to shut the screen down to make it even darker here. After the rocket goes up a short distance, they'll turn the screen back on again, so you'll really get a good effect. But again, you want to stay in your seats from liftoff until the landing of the booster. That's about 7.5 minutes, about 7 minutes, 40 some odd seconds after launch. Again, because it's going to be pretty dark, okay? So you don't want anybody getting hurt, so stay in that position. All right, right now we're about 10 minutes before launch. I'm going to read that safety warning a second time. Please be advised that hazards are inherent in launching and launch viewing. By accepting the invitation to view the launch, you do so with the understanding of a potential risk. Although NASA applies stringent range safety principles and techniques to protect the general public, the workforce, and property for all areas of the Kennedy Space Center during the launch, in the event of an inadvertent circumstance, hazards including debris, blast, and toxics occur. It's imperative that you stay within the controlled area, stay with the group, and strictly follow all instructions provided by NASA. Again, we're about 9 minutes to launch right now. And again, we are going to be turning off the lights about 2 minutes before launch. After we see ignition here, the screen there will still show at least 30 seconds to launch. So the rocket will be going up. We'll turn off that screen so the area will still remain dark. After the rocket goes up a certain distance, that screen will come back on again so you can follow a lot of the other mission events. And again, once we're in that final minute or two, we want you to stay in position. If you're sitting, stay seated. If you're standing, stay standing. Many people I know, a good part of the crowd has been here for the last 2 hours. It'd be very rude if somebody stood up in front of you after you've been watching and waiting here for the last 2 hours. So we ask you to be courteous. And again, I'll give that warning at about the 2-minute mark.
Separate from the second stage. And we'll be listening to some performance calls as we get into the final countdown, of course, and then after liftoff. On the ground, you'll hear SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other.
Now on the display screen, you'll be able to see the booster separations, you'll be able to see the landing burns, be able to see a lot of the different activities. Our next major flight event coming up about a minute from now is the engine chill down. That is, again, getting these engines conditioned to accept the very high temperature, so we'll be cooling them down. That'll be at the 7-minute mark. After that, 2 minutes later, we'll switch to internal power. These are flight batteries on the rocket. That's what it'll use to go into space. The tanks will become completely pressurized at 1 minute. The flight computers will be taking over at 1 minute as well. The launch director will give the final go-ahead for launch at the T-minus 45-second count. The ignition sequence begins at 3 seconds. Again, we can abort at any time, so again, we're going to be paying complete attention. Again, about a at least 45-second to minute delay in that screen. So again, watch the pad, not the screen. When you see the flames, that means you're launching no matter what it says on the screen. You can see the picture from inside the Endurance spacecraft with the crew.
Has started.
Okay, they just got the confirmation of the engine chill I just told you about, so that is underway right now.
Engine pre-valves and start passing just a trickle of liquid oxygen through the Merlin engine pumps, chilling the engines for the start sequence. We do this because the super chilled and densified liquid oxygen is really cold, and we use that small amount of LOX to basically prepare the engine hardware. There's a call out for engine chill, so now we're basically preparing that engine hardware to flow all of the LOX and propellant into it during flight. Next up, we should hear the call out for stage 1 RP1 load completion.
And Dragon SpaceX, stand by for final go, but please confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
Okay, right now, just to the right of the rocket on the view screen, you can see some of that venting taking place.
All right, we heard their crew displays. Those 3 screens from which they can monitor the mission are configured for launch.
Stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
And confirmation that RP1, the densified kerosene or the rocket, propels the crew into orbit. Loading is complete on the first stage. We did hear the second stage was completed a short time ago as well. Now T-minus 6 minutes until launch. We are still loading liquid oxygen.
Okay, we've just passed about the 5-minute mark. I know they just announced 6 minutes, but that's that delay.
Coming up, we will hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition to internal power at about 5 minutes until launch. Then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional rigidity and structural support as we get ready for the strong back to retract. It'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we'll see.
Okay, as we're getting to the final minutes of the count, one of the things I mentioned earlier that I'm going to ask, I know many of you, a good portion of you, have never seen a launch from up close before. So, many people think of this as a football game or a soccer game. If you could keep the clapping and screaming down, for a lot of people, this is their only chance to see a rocket launch. It'd be really good if they got to actually hear the rocket launch. So if you want to hold your applause and such, it'll be much more effective, especially for those folks that have videos, so they don't have a video of the guy next to them screaming rather than hearing the rocket go up. Again, it will take about 20 seconds for the sound to reach us. Okay, we're about 4 minutes to launch right now. Again, if you're standing, stay standing. If you're sitting, stay sitting. Stay in your position. The lights are going to be going off shortly. We don't want anybody getting hurt by moving around.
Mission control that we are retracting the strong back now.
Okay, the strong back is the structure next to the rocket. It is going to be moved back just a few degrees so the rocket will be able to clear that part of the pad. Again, the lights will be going off in about a minute or so. So again, stay where you are. If you stand up and move, you might be tripping over somebody.
45 degrees retracted to give Falcon 9 and Crew-7 room for liftoff.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes.
Now under 4 minutes until launch. Next up, we're looking for the first stage liquid oxygen loading to finish at T-minus 3 minutes. You're starting to see some white clouds on your screen. That is vapor, it's normal. We'll continue to see that build up as we get closer to launch. Obviously, this liquid oxygen that we're loading is super chilled, so a little bit of that will boil off in the hot Florida air.
Stage 1 LOX loading is complete.
Okay, the vehicle now is fully fueled. First and second stages, all propellants on board.
Inside of the Dragon spacecraft, awaiting liftoff just under 3 minutes from now.
Dragon is in terminal count.
Okay, in terminal count right now, again, very short to launch, about 1:45.
Now about 2 minutes and 30 seconds until launch. Next milestone, we're looking up for stage 2 LOX load to complete. Additionally, shortly after that, we'll hear gas closeout begin, isolating the feed lines from the different gas systems for the Falcon 9 rocket. Those will get vented overboard through the umbilicals and the strong back itself.
Okay, we should have about 1 minute to launch. Okay, so again, stay where you're sitting, okay? If you're standing, stay standing, sitting, stay sitting. It's gonna get even darker when we shut off that TV screen. Okay, we have about 50 seconds or so before launch. As soon as the rocket flames come out, we're gonna shut down that screen.
Complete.
And again, keep the voices down so you can really hear the rocket, again, about 20 seconds after launch.
There's the gas closeout call that we expected. Additionally, we will be in auto idle. This puts the rocket in a state the flight computers understand before it takes over, making sure the transition to final countdown is smooth. Coming up at T-minus 1 minute, we'll hear that Dragon is in countdown. Its computer will switch to countdown mode. We'll also hear that the flight termination system on Falcon 9 is armed.
Okay, stand by.
Dragon's in terminal count.
Dragon's flight computer in countdown and configured for launch, and the flight termination system now armed. Less than a minute until liftoff today.
Dragon,
This flight termination
Go for
system.
launch.
Dragon Captain, go for launch.
You heard it, Crew-7 getting the go for launch, just
T-minus
30
30
seconds
seconds.
away for an on-time launch. At the time of liftoff,
Keep it down.
260 miles over southeastern Iraq.
T-minus 15. Okay, minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
off the side. That's very normal. It's a part of the atmosphere called the thermocline, where there's a very big difference in temperature. That's only a few seconds as they go through that. That's very normal.
Stage 1, throttle up.
Okay, they've just gone through max Q, which is the most pressure on the vehicle.
Q and are throttling back up.
Copy, 1 Bravo.
Heard that call from Jasmine on Crew-7, as well as confirmation from the ground. The call out for 1 Bravo means we are in the second and final abort mode for the first stage.
Chill is underway.
To get good performance.
Okay, we now have switched on the video again. So again, take a look at the video displays. To the left and right, at the bottom, you get to see our velocity and our altitude. Again, major mission events coming up very shortly. You're going to see the first stage engines cut off. And again, we want you to stay where you are. 7 minutes 45 seconds into the flight is when we expect to land. You're going to see video from the second stage looking down at the first stage. And at that point, you'll see the separation of the vehicle. Now, we're going to switch to 2 screens. There's a switch right now. You can see on the right-hand side the second stage engine.
Operation and second stage ignition.
Okay, and you will see, again, the first stage on the left will be falling away. The second stage on the right will ignite.
Copy, 2 Alpha. And back ignition.
Okay, so the second stage has turned on. That's what you're looking at right now. The second stage engine is on. That burn will continue to get the crew into space. The first stage will begin its series of coming back to here. And that is the first of a series of 3 burns they'll be making tonight. The boost back burn. And again, where you're going to be looking for that is just to the left of the vehicle assembly building.
Power the spacecraft and our first look at the crew inside. We'll be standing by for SECO. That's the next major milestone for this second stage engine. That comes shortly before 9 minutes into the flight, so we've still got some time on this engine.
SECO stands for the second stage engine cutoff. That's a burn of 6 minutes 3 seconds.
Its way to orbit.
So we're going to begin with that entry burn. That's about 6 minutes 21 seconds into the flight. And that's when the booster is going to start heading back here.
Right now, stage 1 is coasting.
SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
Good call-outs there that Dragon is on the right track.
So again, right now we're about 5 minutes into the flight. The entry burn, the first of the entry burns about 6:21 into the flight, 6 minutes 21 seconds, so we still have a little bit of time. Again, there'll be an orange dot on the first of these burns. Again, the last burn, you'll see a pretty nice looking flame, and again, it'll be to your right, close to that vehicle assembly building. And again, because it's about 11 miles away, landing zone 1 at pad 13, it's going to take about 55 seconds for that sonic boom to make it here. Don't worry, that is definitely going to be noticeable.
Per hour. This single Merlin vacuum engine can provide over 220,000 pounds of...
For about 5.5 minutes in, that entry burn should occur in about a minute.
Today.
Dragon, SpaceX, trajectory nominal.
You've heard the call out to the crew, telling them their trajectory is normal as they're chasing the International Space Station. That space station is in an orbit about what they call 57 degrees longitude, or I should say latitude. So you can cover every part of the Earth from 57 degrees north latitude to 57 south latitude. So we launch towards the north when we do that.
The crew is...
Okay, that entry burn should be occurring right about now.
Continues to propel their flight. Continuing to hear good calls to the crew. Now 5 minutes and 30 seconds into the flight, traveling at 6,400 miles per hour.
Got a very, very clear night.
See the second stage fire for about 3 more minutes.
That entry burn is about 11 seconds in length.
Stage engine cutoff, we will see it separate from Dragon, which will continue its journey.
And you see it, there it is right there, right above. It's heading back here. Again, normally on the display screen right now, you see the crew on the left-hand side. Normally they'll switch to the rocket on the left-hand side. So I don't know if they're going to keep the crew or move to the rocket. I'm assuming they're going to move to the rocket.
Just about 10 seconds to help us slow the vehicle down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. That's not
very shortly, you'll see that landing burn within a minute.
Drag on re-entry, which scrubs roughly 7.
Okay, so there on the left-hand side is the view from that first stage.
On the left-hand side of your screen.
And that will be a landing zone here. Again, this will be a very bright flame compared to what you saw a few minutes ago for the first landing burn. And again, that sonic boom is unmistakable.
And we are
right there by VAD. Almost landed.
Continuing to get good calls.
Stand by for that sonic boom.
It's into the flight. Crew traveling at 9,400 miles per hour. Again, we still have about 1 minute, 45 seconds left with the second stage propelling the crew.
And of course, we are also expecting that landing burn start from Falcon 9 any second now.
Okay, if you see the camera, again, that's a delayed camera. There we go, that's the sonic booms. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. You're just great on following those instructions. I hope you got great videos, and come back again and we'll do launch.
Thank you all.
Great news there that stage 1 has successfully landed back at landing zone 1 in Florida.
And stage 2 continues to propel Dragon and our Crew-7 crew members. We now are coming up on a Seco second stage engine cutoff. Again, looking at that about 8 minutes and 50 seconds into the flight. Everything continues as planned today, now traveling over 13,000 miles per hour. And we're looking for eventually a good orbital insertion at which we'll be traveling. Calls here in Mission Control in Hawthorne. And we are standing by for a second stage engine cutoff. Heard that call for Shannon. That is the call out for Shannon, Ireland, final abort zone.
MVAC shut down.